Good day everybody, my name is Awesomecrunch and welcome to a video that's going to be slightly different to anything I've ever done before. It's been nearly a year since I did a video on the very first Subnautica game, but we all know that one of the main attractions of the series is the incredible collection of creatures that appear in it. Subnautica has some extremely unique life forms, but it's fair to say that in many cases, it's often clear what their counterpart is here on Earth. But in some cases, there are lesser known inspirations which clearly influence the creatures in Subnautica, and so that's what this video is on today. If this one does well, I'll be sure to do one for the Below Zero game as well, so please let me know what you think of the video once you've watched it, and a like would be very, very much appreciated. I'd also just like to give a huge thanks to Bippity, who's a very clever animal person on my Discord server, who helped out with creating this list. Also, there's a link in the description to my server if you want to join us on there. It's a really great time and I do giveaways weekly. Obviously, not all of Subnautica's creatures have obvious inspirations or real-world counterparts, so they won't be included in this list. But if you do think of any more additions, I'd love to know your theories in the comments below. If you do go on to enjoy the video and you're feeling really generous, subscribe if you want to see more in the future. So first off, we start with the most obvious. The Ampule is a huge serpentine creature covered with prongs which are capable of generating powerful zaps of electricity to deal quite a bit of damage to any creature it may feel threatened by. Clearly, the name itself shows inspiration from the eel, a family of fish found on Earth, and so the Ampule appears to be an over-exaggeration of Earth's electric eels, which are capable of generating small electrical shocks, though not nearly on the level of the Ampule. Next up, we have the Mesma. Mesmas are definitely one of the creepiest creatures in Subnautica, capable of manipulating the player's mind, which causes them to hear the PDA telling them to swim closer. When looking for prey, the Mesma will open up its 4 large skin panels which then ripple in colour, mesmerising the unfortunate victim. You might be thinking this sort of creature doesn't exist in the real world, but some creatures really do use this technique to hypnotise the other potential prey or predators. For example, the Cuttlefish has this incredible ability. It uses millions of pigment cells to create ever-changing colours and patterns, which hypnotises the opposition, leaving them vulnerable to attack or allows for the Cuttlefish to make a quick escape. Of course, this effect doesn't work on humans, but it just goes to show that perhaps the Mesma is not that alien after all. The Bleeder is often said to be people's least favourite creature in Subnautica. They're fast, annoying, can deal quite a serious amount of damage if they're not dealt with straight away. The design of the Bleeder can essentially be separated into 2 parts, with the latching on feature seemingly inspired by a leech, while the sac at the end of the body which fills up with the player's blood can be compared to the way a tick's body swells up when full of blood. Alongside the Bleeder, the Biter is often up there on people's most annoying creature list. They're incredibly fast and relatively hard to avoid if you're planning on going on a swim through the grassy plateaus. It's clear that they share a resemblance in their behaviour to a piranha. They're nippy and often exist in packs. They also look like they take some inspiration from the anglerfish, with an antenna protruding from the head. However, the PDA entry for the Biter makes it clear that this antenna is actually used to detect body fluids in the water, rather than to attract prey like your typical anglerfish. Next up we have the crab snake. While they don't entirely look anything like each other, it's possible that the crab snake idea was inspired by the bobbit worm, which is a real-life marine worm which can be found on the ocean floor. Much like the crab snake, the bobbit worm is an ambush predator, meaning that it waits for its prey to be in the area before it leaps from under the floor to grab its meal and pull it back under. Your average bobbit worm is about the length of an arm, but some have been found to be twice the length of a grown man, so perhaps something the size of a crab snake isn't too far from reality. Now we move on to one of Subnautica community's favourite creatures, the Cuttlefish. It's clear from the face that the Cuttlefish shares a striking resemblance with the porcupine fish, with its spaced out, almost pug-like eyes and small mouth. Another interesting part of the Cuttlefish, which appears to have been inspired by a real creature, is the Cuttlefish egg. When you put a Cuttlefish egg side by side with the egg of a Cuttlefish, it's very easy to see how similar they are. Both have a translucent exterior, and within you can see a very small baby version of the creature. I'd argue the egg is actually cuter than the adult Cuttlefish, but I'm sure people will disagree with me there. Next up we have one of my personal favourite creatures from the whole game, the Hoverfish. It's likely that the Hoverfish was at least partly inspired by real-life water striders, or as some people apparently call them, Jesus bugs. By the way, if you know of water striders as Jesus bugs, please let me know because that's the best name for a creature I've ever heard. Clearly, hoverfish are a bit different since they actually spend their time underwater instead of floating above it, but they certainly share some visual similarities with the whole skimmer aspect. One of the strangest named creatures in Subnautica has to be the Reginald. No one really knows why the developers went with this name, but clearly for some reason they decided it was better than Mohawk fish, which was its old name. The Reginald shares many similarities with the Mollidae aquatic family. This comprises the family of ocean sunfishes, whose bodies come to an end just behind the dorsal fin. They're short, stubby fish, and the Reginald certainly shares the same odd backside. Next up is the floater, which has to be one of the most alien creatures in the game. Or is it? The PDA describes the floater as two species living in symbiosis which attach to and attempt to feed on any objects they come into contact with. While this might sound like something out of a sci-fi film, things like this really do exist on Earth. One example of this is a deep-sea creature called pyrosomes. These are made up of hundreds of individual animals which work together to essentially create one single colonial lifeform. Another example of this is the more famous Portuguese man-o'-war. Pyrosomes can grow to incredible lengths, with some being found at 18 meters or 60 feet in length. The floating islands ancient floaters are a great idea of the huge sizes that these colonial lifeforms can grow to, so maybe the floaters aren't as alien as you might have thought. This one might seem a bit obvious, but next up we have the Reefback Leviathan. It's clear that the Reefback essentially plays the role of whales in Subnautica. The way they communicate is very similar, and their size compared to most of the other creatures in the game is vast. Much like the whales here on Earth, the PDA records that reefbacks feed exclusively on plankton-like lifeforms in the water, so they're not a danger to the player. They're still scary the first time you meet them though, and it's one of the main things that players tend to remember after playing the game. Next up we have another Leviathan, the Sea Treader. The idea of a deep-sea creature that walks on three legs isn't as far-fetched as you might think. There's a family of fish called deep-sea tripod fishes. They're small fishes with a maximum length of about 16 inches, mostly found in tropical waters. While they don't look anything like or are anything near the size of the sea treader, these guys are just proof that this kind of life can work. Also, the way they wander in herds definitely shares a resemblance with the way that groups of elephants move around. If you look at the head of a sea treader, you can see it bears a striking resemblance with a weevil, with two round eyes either side of a long snout, or in the sea treader's case, a leg. Finally, the two feelers on the top of the sea treader are very similar to the feelers which can be found on squids here on Earth, so it looks like the sea treader is a real mismatch of creatures. One of the first aggressive creatures you'll meet in Subnautica is the Stalker. They're vicious and relentless predators, with its signature growl and long snout filled with hundreds of razor-sharp teeth. Their unique snout is very similar to that of the gharial crocodile, as you can see here, so it looks like it was potentially inspired by that, but other than that, the Stalker seems pretty alien compared to most of the sea creatures we have here on Earth. Next up we got the Bone Shark. This is a staple predator of Subnautica and is certainly one not to be overlooked. These guys are fast, often hunt in packs, have glow-in-the-dark eyes and have a pretty terrifying roar. While we don't really have any creatures like the bone shark alive today on Earth, if we jump back about 350 million years ago, we can actually find a creature that's not too far from the bone shark at all. This is the Dunkleosteus. These beasts could grow up to 6 meters or 20 feet in length and could weigh up to a ton. They had a two-part bony armoured exterior, which probably made it pretty slow, but they were most likely a very powerful swimmer. While the Dunkleosteus is awesome, I'm pretty glad it's not around anymore, as far as we know anyway. Not sure if I'd prefer the bone shark or the Dunkleosteus to be real, but let me know which one you'd prefer, if prefer is even the right word. The next creature is often said to be people's favourite creature from the safe shallows, the rabbit ray. These guys are awesome looking, peaceful, friendly and curious. They also glow in the dark, which makes everything better. It seems like the rabbit ray takes some inspiration from the spotted eagle ray for the basic shape of the creature as well as the way it moves. For the colourful appearance of the rabbit ray, it appears it shares some similarities with the Chromodoris loci, which is a type of sea slug. The main similarities with these guys is the brightly coloured neon patterns and the two orange protrusions which come from the top of the head. Another Safe Shallows favourite among the Subnautica community is the Garyfish. Apart from obviously being inspired by Gary from SpongeBob, the Garyfish also shares some similarities with the Mudskipper here on Earth. Both have a similar body shape and weirdly positioned eyes at the top of the head, but other than that, they're pretty alien. Next up we have the only flying creature in Subnautica, the Skyray. Based purely on its colour scheme, it's safe to say that the closest thing we have to the Skyray here on Earth is a magpie. But if you look closer, you'll notice that a Skyray's arms extend all the way to the end of its wings, and so it looks like they're also partially inspired by bats, which share this similar feature. Sticking with the ray theme, the Ghost Ray and Crimson Ray differ in appearance, but they're practically the same creature. Unsurprisingly, both of the rays look to be largely inspired by the manta ray, which can be found in warm waters here on Earth. I don't know about you, but these are some of my favourite species on the planet, so I'm really glad to see Subnautica has an equivalent for them in the waters of 4546b. Moving on now from the friendlier creatures, the sand shark is up next. The sand shark is definitely one of the most iconic creatures in Subnautica, with its 2 pairs of eyes, seemingly infinite rows of razor-sharp teeth, and a bioluminescent mouth. It's a very creepy predator indeed. The closest thing to the sand shark we have here on Earth is the stargazer fish. This family of fish have eyes on the top of their heads, hence the name, and an upward-facing mouth in a large head. They bury themselves in the sand, just like the sand shark, and leap out of it to ambush any prey that pass overhead. While they're not as big as sand sharks, with the biggest stargazers measuring at just under a metre, they're still pretty creepy. Next up is the blood crawler. This is definitely not a creature for the faint of heart or anyone with a fear of creepy crawlies. The blood crawler not only looks terrifying and resides in one of the creepiest biomes on 4546b, they also will attack the player if you get too close. Unfortunately, we do have an equivalent to these creatures here on Earth. The closest thing we have to a blood crawler is the spider crab family, specifically the Japanese spider crab. While they don't exactly look alike, they're very similar in nature and the way they have extremely long legs. The Japanese spider crab can grow up to 5.5 meters or nearly 20 feet from claw to claw, and they can weigh up to 19 kilograms or about 40 pounds. Even though the blood crawler is way more aggressive than the Japanese spider crab, I'd be terrified at either of them if I stumbled across one in the pitch black ocean. Moving deeper from the blood cup caves into the Lost River, next up is the river prowler. You might be wondering how anything on Earth could be remotely close to the river prowler, but their appearance is actually less alien than you might have thought. While certainly nowhere near the size of a river prowler, certain types of eel larvae, known as leptocephalus, actually share a creepy resemblance with the river prowler, with a translucent body and visible skeleton-like structure and needle-sharp teeth. The river prowler really isn't as alien a concept as it might have first seemed. Next up we have the Ghost Leviathan, the second largest aggressive Leviathan in the game, and I'd argue the scariest sounding creature on planet 4546b. The Ghost Leviathan is definitely something you wouldn't want to encounter here on Earth. Thankfully, as far as we know, Earth's oceans don't include any creatures of the size and aggression of the Ghost Leviathan, but we do, surprisingly, have creatures that might have inspired it. Clearly, the hammerhead shape of the Ghost Leviathan's head can be found on hammerhead sharks here on Earth, so this sort of creature does exist. But in the appearance, we have a species of marine worms called Tomopteris, which looks strikingly similar to the Ghost. While these things have only been found at just under 2 inches in length, it's clear to see where their potential inspiration came from. With the bright blue bioluminescence and the small fins down the side, the appearance of the Ghost Leviathan is not as far-fetched as it looks. Finally, everyone's favourite and least favourite creature in the game, the Reaper Leviathan, the third largest aggressive creature in Subnautica, capable of instantly killing the player if you're unfortunate enough to get caught in its 4 massive mandibles. You might be thinking to yourself that surely there can't be any creatures here on Earth remotely similar to the Reaper Leviathan, but you'd be wrong. On Earth, we have the Oarfish. These are the longest bony fish alive, with some specimens being found up to 11 meters or 36 feet in length. These are very rarely seen, so who knows how big they can really get in the deeper parts of the ocean. There are unconfirmed reports of 17 meter or 55 foot long specimens weighing in at 270 kilograms or around an incredible 600 pounds. Most of the information we have on oarfish come from specimens which have either been accidentally caught or washed up on the seashore, as they typically swim at depths of up to 1,000 meters, far, far away from any human contact. Luckily for humans, oarfish primarily feed on zooplankton, shrimps, jellyfish, squids and other small fish, as opposed to human beings, which the Reaper Leviathan seems so hungry for. Not only do they share a similar eel-like appearance, they also have a very similar colour scheme, with the typical bluish-white body and red dorsal fins. But that's all for this video. I'm sure there are many more comparisons that I've missed, so please let me know if you can think of any more in the comments below. I chose not to include every single creature in the game because I didn't want it to drag on for too long, but if you did pick up on any that I missed, I'd love to read what you say about them. If you did enjoy the video, please leave a like as it helps the channel out more than you might think, and of course subscribe if you'd like to see more Subnautica content in the future. Thanks for watching, until the next one, I'll see you guys in the next one. Ta-ra my friends.